What you're looking at is one of my videos. I explain how you can use a bag to make a BCB, and here's photos of one that one of the people that watch my channel made. Anyhow, in this video I'm going to talk about the polymeric adhesive, otherwise known as thermodynamics, microscopic thermodynamics. This will be a two-part series, so stay tuned. Complex heterogeneous microbial communities called biofilms. Sometimes these biofilms are beneficial to a system, and in other circumstances they are undesirable and will clog filter elements to the point of hindering, channeling, and even stopping altogether water flow. The truth be told, the direct prevention of bacteria adhesion and the formation of undesirable biofilms in our filters would lessen the likelihood of clogging of microbial particles on these substrates or mediums. For the hobbyist, understanding a subsequent formation of friendly biofilm formation and their development are crucial, and that they will inhibit the formation of undesirable biofilms and promotion of establishment of useful biofilms. In this video I'm going to be talking about the association of microscopic thermodynamic substances and how it related to the small particulate polymeric substrate size inside of a biosinosis clarification basket known as a BCB and plenum. The bacteria adhesion on a solid substrate like that of cat litter, laterite, and its polymeric surfaces was tested for its dissimilarities or its similarities to other filtration mediums, thermodynamics, and aquarium microbiology. Now there is a topic you never hear of or read about, but play a very extensive part in water quality and bacterial colonization. For those of you that are looking to go that next step into learning how and the whys of the anoxic filtration system and a plenum, thermodynamics, and bacterial polymeric adhesion works, this video may help you in your understanding of such. Some new aquarium terminologies that 25, 30 years ago were never heard of or were only talked about in very small circles and mostly in scientific groups at that, are words like anoxic, vacuitated bacteria, permeability, pore water, convectional movement, diffusion, and now thermodynamics on a microscopic level. These words have very little meaning to the unadventurous hobbyist because most don't apply, or the complication of such fundamentally constructed idealisms of thermodynamics is just too much for the hobbyist to comprehend, and therefore it is best to leave information like that alone. But if you're watching my YouTube videos, then you are probably the more intelligent of that group of hobbyists out there, and taking that next step into microbiology as just another way to grasp what the differences are with filters that do and those that don't live up to expectations of the hobbyists. When we talk about polymeric surfaces, the first thing that comes up is abrasive adhesion, which is determined by the surface properties and its thermodynamics for the adhesion of cells from a suspension onto a solid substrate, used in having an affinity for water or hydrophilic in nature. Hydrophilic substrates can be very useful to the hobbyist, especially for keeping water clean and uncontaminated by biological or chemical insults. The adhesion of cells is determined by the surface properties involved. Example, the surface tension of the adhering particles of the substrate and of the suspended liquid medium. In other words, how fast is the liquid medium traveling over or through the substrate, which the cells are to adheres to, and the media surface topography. In essence, adhesion is more native to hydrophilic substrates, substrates of relatively high surface tension, than those of hydrophobic substrates, smoother surfaces, tensions, like that of plastic mediums. When the surface tension of a bacteria is larger than that of the suspending medium, then the opposite prevails. The smoother a substrate has, the less likely for easy bacteria colonization. Also, it's been proven that the colonization of bacteria also play a part in whether or not the substrate is negatively charged, which bacteria have an easier time adhering to the substrate, or whether it is positively charged, which bacteria have a harder time of adhering to a substrate that is positively charged, period. Therefore, if you have a very thin substrate, like a lot of people do, and they put it down as you watch a lot of videos, that substrate stays positively charged, which has a harder time adhering bacteria to it than a deeper substrate bed of, let's say, 3 or 4 inches like you have in a plenum, which then becomes negatively charged. Okay? Suspended bacteria in the water column are useless to the hobbyist and will do very little in the water purification if the colonization is inhibited by hydrophobic polymeric surface substrates made from, example, Teflon, polyethylene, and for example, polystyrene, and mediums like that. But most of those mediums are used in food service, but they are used, believe it or not, in filters. Yet it is not uncommon to see filter mediums made of any one of these plastics, and yet they're used in food industry, yet they're using them in the aquarium industry. As you see, hang on the back filters with little fins on them and stuff like that, and the manufacturer's saying, oh, this is for bacteria colonization. Okay. With the exception of Teflon. Teflon is being too hydrophobic and disruptive and has the adverse tendency to disintegrate bacteria in aqueous solutions. Good for electrical wiring, but not good for bacteria colonization. So that's why, if you ever wondered why manufacturers don't use Teflon for a filter medium, that's the reason why. Most of the microorganisms that make up the nitrogen cycle are polymeric dependent according to surface tension, and the number of bacteria adhering per unit surface is dictated by the thermodynamics. Manufacturers of these synthetic mediums know by testing the number of bacteria adhering per unit surface area by image analysis. The hobbyists would be quite surprised that some of these mediums, however, may have lots of surface area, as stated in their advertisement, per unit, but lower bacteria colonization than natural elements would. Natural elements would be silica-based or carbon-based, example, clay, sand, rocks, and calcium carbonate that is used in labs for testing bacteria. We see this all the time when hobbyists add more of a plastic medium to a designated filtration system to do the work that it was supposed to do with far less. These shortcomings are determined by the available foodstuff, surface area per given unit, carbon availability and its oxygen demand, but also the thermodynamics of the polymeric surface medium used in application for bacteria processes. The last one alone will determine how long it will take for bacteria to establish colonies and resist water shearing, along with the number of cells that will grow on the medium itself. The research conducted was to determine if these plastic polymeric surfaces substrates were as good or better than using a natural substrate like clay, and would it outcompete and have better protocol. The test was conducted with already cured filter substrates of not less than 90 days old, and all polymeric surfaces were tested. The parameters were determined by using a spectrophotometric analysis using the Hatch DR2000 once again. From the experiment, the established number of nitrifying bacteria adhering per unit of microsurface area would be established, and seen if they correlated well with thermodynamic expected predictions. That was calculated in advance, and that information would be determined the surface tension resistance of the different bacteria species correlating to the medium being used. What was found is that two 7x7x11 BCB baskets had as much bacteria in them as an entire Nexus filter using a K1 as a medium. For those of you who do not do ponding, Nexus filters are a big, huge filter with K1 medium, which is a plastic medium that's constantly being churned in the filter. If you don't know much about them, you can Google them and you can find out how big and expensive. They're very expensive filters. I'm just guessing here they're anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 a filter for pond use. However, the Nexus with the K1 had better utilization of available audiotropic bacteria due to the better medium exposure, and the anoxic filtration system had better usage of heterotrophic bacteria across the board with a much larger bacteria count. This also goes for a plenum that use a natural substrate versus that of a plastic medium as used in hang on the back filters or canister filters, which prove the less confinement a medium unit has, the better bacteria uniformity exposed to incoming insults. But this does explain why these filters need more medium like K1 or plastic bioball units in them than expected. Because a BCB and or plenum is static or very slow moving, and water must pass around it or not directly through its medium itself, except in a plenum circumstances, the bacteria must depend on ions coming into them through slow diffusion, chemsorption, or ion displacement. If the medium were to be exposed like that of K1 used in a Nexus filter, then the medium would be compromised and anoxic conditions would not exist, and like the Nexus filter, then nitrifiers would predominate. This then explains why so many BCBs are to be used, example, in high bioloads. Even though the bacteria count is high per BCB, the utilization of heterotrophic facultative bacteria is slow to expose to biological and chemical insults, and the bacteria can find other food sources as needed. But the utilization of those foodstuffs was better in a BCB and plenum because of longer dwell times inside the basket or plenum substrate itself. Insalts only needed one pass through the filter's medium with better utilization of the entire available foodstuff exposed to it than that of a plastic medium that was being agitated, taking several passes through the medium. This also includes canister filters and hang on the back filters too, which will take several passes through the medium to do the same work as one pass through a BCB or plenum for that matter. This example why the heterotrophic anaerobic facultative bacteria attack nitrogen for its available oxygen and N2, nitrogen gas, is its byproduct. The United filters, BCBs, along with a plenum, has a higher good bacteria count than what is expected, but the utilization of special facultative bacteria in question could be better optimally if the filter was re-engineered to do so. However, to do this would compromise the system's inexpensiveness to the hobbyist, and then other conventional filters would become the better choice. This also would explain why in colder climates the utilization of foodstuff continues with such high bacteria count per BCB, competing with heterotrophs, while other filters are teetering on cold water conditions, destruction, with a lesser bacteria count or a dead bacteria count altogether. Plastic filter mediums are great if the hobbyist understands ahead of time that aiding more than what is recommended is the norm. For years, manufacturers have known this, but this is a tricky balancing act to make the medium better and polymeric surface properties without the negative responses of clogging the medium. Example, that of a bio wheel with over a mile of fiber in one small wheel. In order for the plastic medium to have a large bacteria count per unit, the surface porosity would have to then be increased like that of a crystalline structure of clay and laterite. Therefore, there is a compromise that has to be recognized on surface properties of a filter medium used and the microscopic thermodynamic polymeric bacteria-friendly substrates. This is part one of the thermodynamic substrates. And what we have just went through here is in order for a substrate to work properly and to work its best and carry more bacteria in it, it has to have some way of having a crystalline structure attached to it. And manufacturers have known this for years. And that's why they are making mediums that have crystalline structures attached to them versus just a lot of surface area. I'll give you an example. What has a lot of surface area? Sand has a lot of surface area, but it does not have a crystalline structure to it. Therefore, you need more sand to achieve what, for example, clay that has been baked with the crystalline structure has. You understand what I mean? It takes more of that because what you're depending on is basically a small, extremely small gravel, sand is, but it only has a surface area of completely around that particular matter of sand. I'm just giving this as an example. So you need more of it to achieve what a BCB would achieve or something that has a crystalline structure. A lot of mediums today are being made, like the fluval stratum that I'm using has a lot of indentations in it, like a crystalline structure in it. Kitty litter has a crystalline structure in it. Laterite has a crystalline structure in it. These crystalline structure mediums become negatively charged if made deep enough, but you have to have water movement without hindrance going through them. Now, that brings up the question that a lot of people will bring up, like the Wallstat method, for example, it uses mud. Mud, as I've explained to you, can compact just from gravity and water. So this is what happened to, and as I give you an example of Martha Stewart, where people had walked on the mud, compacted, no oxygen got in, and all the grass died. Remember when I explained that to you, that really happened to Martha Stewart. Anyhow, This is what happens with some of these substrates. They begin to compact too much inside the aquarium and therefore hinder biological processes to take place. Makes a lot of sense. So if you are going to use a sand substrate, you need to then make sure that you have some way of moving elements through that substrate. And one way of doing it is using a plenum, because then you, like a slow moving plenum, for example, because then you can move the water out of that plenum, which means that you will replace the water that you are moving very slowly, which will help keep water movement through a substrate which is so tightly packed like that of sand. It does not have a crystalline structure, and therefore sand must be made very thick in order to become negatively charged, at least 4 inches to become negatively charged. That's why when you make a substrate that's very thin, maybe 1 inch, it stays positively charged. As I explained, that positively charged substrates are harder to colonize with bacteria than negatively charged substrates. So, if you cannot move fluids easy enough through any substrate, okay, and it is still negatively charged, if it's hindered in some way, then it will become a negative positive charged substrate, which explains why that some of these substrates can't hold the colonization of bacteria as well as bacteria that stays negatively charged and has water movement going through them, but at a slower rate, which then means that at that rate, if you find the right rate of water moving going through it, it will take care of everything in one pass, versus like Eheim had proved that it took 72 hours in one of their canister filters to get rid of ammonia. That's how long it took. So that means it took several passes, lots of passes of going through a canister filter than it would the same is if you were using a plenum as your entire biological filter. Okay, and these are results right from Eheim, not from me. These are Eheim's results. It took several passes to go through the substrate to break down the ammonia. I think you can look that up. If I remember correctly, it was 72 hours to do that, where versus a plenum goes so slow that it will break down the ammonia in just one pass. So next time I will do part 2 of thermodynamics and substrates so you can understand it a little better. And until next time, this is Dr. Novak, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.